Hello folks, and happy Halloween. I hope it's as spooky as it can be, though nothing is spookier than that Breath of the Wild 2 delay, is it?
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
Anyways, last year I poured my heart and soul into a video focusing on an area of horror that I felt Legend of Zelda excels at, namely, body horror. It was a long video about a very specific thing. This year I wanted to focus on a broader field of spooks and scares, so I decided to recruit my most excellent pals in the Sheikah squad to tell me something that they find particularly unsettling or scary about Legend of Zelda. Without further ado, let's get into the spooks.
Zombies. A staple entity when it comes to monsters and horror as a whole. Even the Legend of Zelda series has an enemy based on them. We're all intimately familiar with the head-biting, piggybacking, high-pitched shrieking horrors that are Redeads. But while Redeads more closely resemble a traditional zombie, the Shadow Beasts also have characteristics similar to the undead. Few things in Twilight Princess are as creepy as the Shadow Beasts. The Shadow Beasts are dark, haunting figures that appear all across Hyrule, dropping out of portals and roaming the land in packs. With a pitch-black, spindly body, long tendrils of dark hair, and a face with no distinguishing features, these monsters have one of the scariest designs in the Zelda series, looking more akin to a Lovecraft creature than something found in The Legend of Zelda. Shadow Beasts are powerful beings to the point that only a few were needed to overrun Hyrule Castle and defeat Princess Zelda. When fighting a group of Shadow Beasts, you must not leave one alive by itself, as it will shriek and in an act similar to necromancy, will raise its fallen comrades back from the dead to continue their evil doings. These monsters are in fact the poor unfortunate victims of Zant, corrupted by his dark magic and transformed into evil beings. The members of the Twilight were cursed and forced against their will to become vile killing machines. Shadow Beasts, much like Redeads, use a shriek ability. While Redeads will freeze you in your tracks and try to munch on your brains, the howl of a Shadow Beast is much more haunting in that it has the ability to raise the dead. Shadow Beasts have to be defeated strategically so that the remaining monster doesn't call its friends back to life. This makes the Shadow Beasts one of the scarier enemies in Zelda to me, just given the fact that in a group, they have the potential to be immortal. Even Link gets scared when he hears them scream. During Link's travels into the Twilight Realm of the Eldin Province, we see the effect the Shadow Beasts have had on the villagers in Kakariko Village. The children are visibly scared, and the villagers have barricaded themselves into the home of the shaman Renato. It's here that Barnes gives us a first-hand account of the capabilities of these Twilight monsters. Barnes tells a harrowing tale of how a Shadow Beast attacked the lady from the general store, and how a whole gang from the village went to save her. Upon their arrival, the lady was gone, and 2 Shadow Beasts were waiting. This story implies that the Shadow Beasts also had the power to turn their victims, which is an even more grisly detail once you realize that defeating the Shadow Beast meant that you are likely putting someone out of their misery and freeing them from a curse of killing, much like a traditional werewolf or zombie story. Kakariko Village is presumed to have been way more populated than the state you find it in during the game. Once you arrive in Kakariko Village, you come face to face with 3 more Shadow Beasts. Are these corrupted Twilight, or the innocent villagers of Kakariko, zombified by Zant's evil power? After all, Kakariko Village is all but a ghost town following the attack.
The Legend of Zelda is home to some of the greatest and most memorable areas in all of gaming. Sure, you might remember getting the Master Sword for the first time, or maybe completing that really tough temple that kept you up all night. But there is something else hidden deeper that reminds us that being memorable isn't always a good thing. Something creeping below the surface of Hyrule, something so horrific that it has not been shown in a single Zelda game since. And that is the Dead Hand. At first glance, the Dead Hand and its pale form are fairly creepy, but nothing too unmanageable when you remember that it's just a video game. Well, when you look at this thing a little bit deeper, you begin to realize how terrifying it really is. It has, as Navi states, infinite, long, slender hands with sharp nails ready to grab unsuspecting prey. The splotches of blood on its body, mostly dried, tell the story of many unfortunate victims, as do the countless humanoid skulls that line the creature's lair. Its hands seem to have been cut off or perhaps worn away from years of digging. which is something that we can see it does with great ease, despite its monstrous size. I often wonder, how does this abomination sustain itself? After all, the Shadow Temple and the bottom of the well, where this thing calls its home, have been long forgotten and left to rot. We know it can dig, and very well at that. Perhaps it stalks its prey in the fields of Hyrule, using the many grottos left during the Hyrulean Civil War, or maybe just plucking unsuspecting victims from their homes in the nearby towns. Looking at it a bit more optimistically, perhaps it merely feeds on the corpses generously left by the citizens of Kakariko Village in the nearby graveyard. Should you find yourself captured or taken to its lair, fighting off the dead hand is nearly hopeless. Even with proper weaponry, you will likely be restrained by its many hands as you are consumed alive. There have, however, been 2 known reports of this creature. Luckily, both of them were confronted in their lair and bested by the heroic one. As it lie dying, the dead hand twitches as life leaves its body and it fades into the earth. I'm not sure if I take more comfort in the thought that there is but one lone dead hand that can come back from death, or maybe that there are just more. Many, many more that we haven't seen yet.
What's up, guys? It's Edible Incredible. Happy Halloween, and today we're going to dive into one creepy thing in the Zelda series. So I was wandering around good old Ocarina of Time thinking, okay, what creepy thing do I want to talk about? And one thing I think stood out the most, something that we all know very well, especially those that are completionists. Definitely not me. So the spiders from Twilight Princess are creepy as hell. Absolutely. Going against them is one thing, but imagine after being alive for 18 plus years, or maybe even 10 years, or maybe 50 years, one day waking up with 8 legs and 8 eyes, looking yourself in the mirror. Okay, I've just realized, like, this sounds like a dramatic realizing you're Spider-Man scene, but I swear it's not as cool as that. You're a legit spider, bro. You're not Spider-Man. So given this situation, waking up, looking at yourself in the mirror, realizing that you have to come to terms with this new reality. If the player, Link, aka you, decides not to collect the Skulltulas, which I would assume over 50% of most playthroughs, people do not collect the Skulltulas. So, high chance this family will have to endure being a Skulltula, a spider, for the rest of their life. Accepting eating rats and bats and all that shit. So I did a quick Google search, right? And I was like, okay, if I became a spider, right, what would I need to eat? What would I need to come to terms with? How creepy would this be? And quickly, Google tells me, obviously insects, right? While spiders feast primarily on insects, some large spiders have been known large. So first of all, these humanoid spiders are obviously large spiders. So if you are a large spider, they have been known to eat worms, snails, and even small frogs, lizards, birds, and bats. Sit with that for a second. Digest that. Okay, and I took another step. So okay, maybe you can come to terms with being a spider, right? Not a big deal. I can eat some rats and shit. But obviously as a human, we have no predators, right? As insects, as spiders, as wild dogs, whatever, you're going to have predators. So, what are spiders' predators? Okay, before I keep talking, skip the rest of this section if you are just terrified of these kind of things. Another Google search. So for 1, you have to come to terms with being a spider. For 2, you have to watch out for centipedes, scorpions, and some insects such as wasps that feed on spiders. Wasp species such as tarantula hawks or spider wasp paralyze the spider with its sting and lay an egg inside the spider's abdomen. Then, when the wasp larvae emerge, they eat the spider from the inside out. Holy shit, this is creepy as hell. At least the one thing that is the nice outlier for this curse is that at least you're with your family. And you can at least endure it with your family. Imagine by yourself. That'd be awful. So that is my one creepy thing from Ocarina of Time.
Snow Peak Temple is one of my favorite temples in the Zelda series. Not only is it just a wicked cool dungeon theme and design-wise, but it's also got the Yetis, Yetta and Yeto, two of the sweetest and most unique folks you'll find in any iteration of Hyrule. Hey, be honest, if you were a Yeti, you'd also try to eat Wolf Link. But yeah, I love this dungeon, and the only thing that rubs me the wrong way regarding it is its final boss, Zelda. Tell me this transformation doesn't come off as seriously disturbing, especially coming from such a sweet and sincere fluffball of a character. And all this is thanks to a shard of the Mirror of Twilight. The fixed gaze on the mirror, the retracting head movement, the demonic screeches, and her almost parasitic-like need to protect and keep the mirror to herself, to let it continue consuming her. The Mirror of Twilight might be an artifact used to banish Hyrule's most cruel beings, such as the Dark Interlopers or Ganondorf, but it seems the artifact itself holds its fair share of evil magic. As the final link between Hyrule and the Twilight Realm, we know the mirror is a gateway, but beyond that, why is the mirror able to corrupt the minds of those who stare into it? Could it be that gazing into the Twilight Realm is too much for the inhabitants of the light to understand, driving them to a temporary madness? We know that the Light World inhabitants can't exist outside of spirit form within Twilight. Or could this reaction from gazing into the mirror be due to a reflection of the will of those who it has banished to the Twilight Realm before? After all, it is a mirror. Reflecting is kind of its thing. Unfortunately for us, we might never know. But doesn't it make your skin crawl just thinking about it? An item so powerful it can overtake and completely change one's personality, essentially transforming them into its own protective zombie. What an enigma.
As for me, I wanted to briefly talk about the Shadow Temple as a way to wrap this video up. The Shadow Temple often carries the label of the scariest Zelda temple, and it isn't terribly difficult to understand why. It was purpose-built for the sake of being scary. The Shadow Temple is often lambasted for being way too straightforward and linear, and while this is true, I think that's largely the point of it. The Shadow Temple isn't meant to serve as a satisfying head-scratcher in the same way something like the Spirit Temple is. It's meant to serve as a haunted house, relying on entertaining you with a cavalcade of grotesque imagery and violently imaginative set-piece rooms. The mirror puzzles in the Spirit Temple are entertaining because they make you stop and ask, what do I need to do here? Whereas the Shadow Temple makes you stop and ask, what the hell happened here? The Shadow Temple has some of the best environmental storytelling of any dungeon in the entire series, and it was clear from the get-go that the purpose of this temple was to keep the player on edge and a little bit spooked. There's a short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Amelas. It's about an idyllic city. Every day you wake up to a beautiful day with the best weather, you spend your days in hedonic bliss, and at night you fall asleep completely satisfied with life after eating your absolute favorite foods for dinner every night. It's a perfect existence. Except one day, when you come of age, they take you to the only locked door in the city. Inside is a dank, dark room with a miserable child sitting in the center. This child, maybe 10 years old, spends every moment in this room, being given nothing to eat other than cornmeal and grease, often beaten and in constant agony. Every moment of this child's existence is misery, and as the door is opened, the child begs you for mercy. However, no mercy can be shown. Though the reasons are not specified, the good fortunes of Amelas depend entirely on the suffering of this child. If they free the child, Amelas's blessings end, and all who are brought to see this child are given two options: continue living within the walls of the wonderful city, knowing the sins that are committed to keep it so grand, or refuse to take part in such a horrid exchange and leave it behind. To bring justice to this child is to bring evil to the city, so the citizens choose to continue living out their idyllic lives as if they had never seen anything, thinking that the suffering that takes place in the dark room is simply a necessity to maintain the joy of the city. The hell of that room maintains the peace of the realm. The Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. The Shadow Temple, located in the Kakariko village graveyard, is a place where the Sheikah, entrusted with the lives of Hyrule's royal family, have historically taken enemies of the royal family to be interrogated or worse. Because it stands as a symbol of Hyrule's dark history, it is taboo for the royal family to speak of this temple and its horrific purpose. One might be able to argue that Hyrule is indeed Amelas, and that the unspeakable deeds committed within the walls of the Shadow Temple are represented by the child in the cellar. In Ocarina of Time, the Sheikah are all but gone, and the Shadow Temple lies totally fallen to evil. But I wonder what it looked like beforehand, when it was occupied by the Sheikah and being used for its intended purpose. Just how horrific were the actions taken there? If you were brought before the Shadow Temple and shown the extent of the horrors committed to keep Hyrule safe, would you feel comfortable staying, or would you leave it behind? At times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage, does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes, also a man or a woman much older falls silent for a day or two, then leaves home. These people go out into the street and walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walk straight out of the city of Amelas through the beautiful gates. They keep walking across the farmlands of Amelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveler must pass down village streets between the houses with yellow lit windows and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone, they go west or north towards the mountain. They go on. They leave Amelas. They walk ahead into the darkness and they do not come back. The place they go toward is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the City of Happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. But they seem to know where they're going, the ones who walk away from Amelas. Thanks for joining me for another spooky year. Happy Halloween, and I'll see you next year.